Blood ran down the corner of her mouth, dark against her pale skin. Her eyes were steady, sharp as a blade, and her voice cut through the heavy air. "I'm not your property," she said, her tone cold and unshaken. The words seemed to hang there, almost daring someone to step closer. In the distance, boots crunched against dry dirt, slow and deliberate. Each step grew louder. The sound carried the weight of trouble, men with guns, and no mercy. Somewhere beyond the low hill, the metallic click of a rifle being cocked broke the silence. By the fence line, a man stood in the shade of a weathered barn. He was tall, lean, and carried himself like someone who had seen enough of the world to know when to stand still. A wide-brimmed hat hid most of his face, but the set of his jaw showed he was paying attention. This was the rancher, alone on a stretch of land that seemed to go on forever, a place where the wind told its own stories. The air was heavy, not from rain but from heat and dust. Every breath tasted of the earth. Far off, thunder grumbled like an old man waking from a bad dream, though no clouds had yet gathered. It was the kind of day where even the sun felt sharp, cutting into the skin. He didn't know her yet. He didn't know her name, or why she stood there with blood on her lips and defiance in her eyes. But something in the way she refused to look away told him trouble wasn't just coming, it had already arrived. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he didn't move. The rancher's name was Eli Ward. Folks in town knew the name, though most hadn't spoken to him in years. He'd been living alone on this stretch of land for over a decade, keeping to himself, keeping out of trouble. His days started before the sun. The first light would spill over the hills, and Eli would already be saddling his horse, checking the fences, and making sure the well pump still worked. The work was steady, and the quiet suited him. It was the kind of life where a man could hear himself think, though sometimes those thoughts weren't easy company. Eli had once been part of something bigger, a family, a woman who laughed easily, a home that felt warm. But life has a way of taking without asking. His wife had died young, fever taking her before the doctor could ride out. They'd never had children, and after she was gone, the ranch just felt like a place to keep breathing. The townsfolk respected him, in that distant way people do with men who keep to themselves. He'd ride in once a month for supplies, flour, coffee, tobacco, and exchange no more than a few words at the general store. People said he was polite, but his eyes never lingered, and his voice was always quiet, as if speaking too loud might bring something down on him. Despite his distance from the world, Eli was not a hard man. His hands were calloused, but his touch was gentle with the horses. He'd mend a broken fence without cursing, pour fresh water into a trough before the animals knew they were thirsty. Sometimes he'd leave an extra sack of grain at a neighbor's gate without saying a word. Still, there were things about Eli folks didn't ask. They didn't ask why he never went near the saloon, why he never joined in the poker games, or why he walked away when certain men started talking. And they didn't ask about the scar that ran from his left ear down to his jaw, a thin, pale reminder of a fight he didn't speak of. The truth was, Eli had built his life around staying clear of trouble. Out here, trouble had a way of finding you if you went looking for it, and he wasn't looking. At least, not until that afternoon, when he saw her standing by his fence line, blood on her mouth and fire in her eyes. That moment had cracked something open in him, though he didn't yet understand what. For the first time in years, Eli Ward felt the faint, unwelcome stirrings of a choice that might pull him out of the quiet life he'd built and throw him straight into the path of danger. And deep down, he already knew he wasn't going to turn away. She came stumbling through the dry grass, one hand gripping the fence post to keep from falling. Her dress was torn at the hem, streaked with dirt, and one sleeve hung half-ripped at the shoulder. The sun caught strands of her hair, tangled and dusty, as if she'd been running for miles. Eli didn't move right away. He watched her steady herself, take a few breaths, and glance over her shoulder like she expected someone to come riding hard after her. There was a look in her eyes, part fear, part stubbornness, that he recognized from somewhere deep in his own past. When she finally noticed him, her body tensed. Her fingers gripped the fence tighter. "I don't need your help," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. Eli's gaze didn't change. Didn't offer it, he replied. That seemed to ease her just a fraction. She straightened her back, as if holding on to whatever pride she still had left. But up close, he could see the truth in the way her hands shook and the way she leaned on that fence like her legs might give out. You're bleeding, he said. It's not yours to worry about. He could have let her walk on. She looked like the kind of trouble he'd spent years avoiding. But there was something about the way she was standing there, alone, hurt, and yet unwilling to bow, that made turning away feel wrong. You're a long way from town, Eli said. That's the point. Her eyes flicked again to the open field behind her, scanning the horizon. It was empty now, but the kind of empty that didn't stay that way for long. Eli finally stepped closer, slow and unthreatening. There's water in the barn, he said. You can drink, wash up, then you can go, if that's what you want. For a moment, he thought she might refuse, but her shoulders eased just slightly as she gave a small nod. Only for a minute, she said. Inside, she drank from the tin cup like she hadn't had water in days. She didn't thank him, and he didn't ask her name. But when their eyes met, there was a flicker, quick and faint, of something that felt like trust, even if neither of them wanted to admit it. And outside, far beyond the hills, a faint cloud of dust had begun to rise. By late afternoon, the light had shifted. The sun hung lower, turning the land a deep gold. Eli stood on his porch, a cup of coffee in hand, watching the far ridge. The woman, still silent about her name, was in the barn, resting on a pile of old feed sacks. That's when he saw it, a smudge of dust barely visible against the horizon. It was the kind of sign every rancher knew how to read. Riders, more than one, moving slow, but steady, like men who weren't in a hurry because they were sure of where they were headed. In town, whispers had been running for days. Eli had heard them during his last trip. Talk of a woman gone missing from a ranch to the south. Some said she'd been stolen, others that she'd run away from her husband, a man with a temper and money enough to bend the law. Whoever she was, the men looking for her weren't the type to knock politely. Eli set his cup down, his mind working. Trouble was riding his way, and he didn't need to ask why. By the time he went back inside, she was already standing in the doorway of the barn, eyes on the same dust trail. She didn't speak, but he saw her jaw tighten. That was all the answer he needed. They'll be here by nightfall, he said. I know. He waited, but she didn't offer more. Her silence wasn't fear, it was calculation, the kind of quiet that came from knowing exactly what men like that would do if they caught her. Who are they to you? Eli asked. Not men worth naming. That told him enough. The riders were still miles off, but their shadow was already here, stretching across his land and into his life. Eli had lived years without crossing the wrong people. But as he looked at her, standing there barefoot in the dust, defiance still burning in her eyes, he felt the old weight of a decision settling on him. Some things a man could walk away from, and some things wouldn't let him. They sat at the small table in Eli's kitchen as the light faded, the air thick with the smell of dust and coffee gone cold. She hadn't said much all afternoon, but now, with the riders getting closer, she seemed to decide he deserved to know why. My name's Clara, she said finally. Her voice was low, as if speaking it too loud might call someone's attention. Eli waited. I was married to a man named Royce Maddox. You heard of him? Eli nodded slowly. Maddox was the kind of man whose name traveled far, wealthy, mean, and dangerous. He owned cattle, land, and a handful of lawmen who pretended justice was on his side. I didn't marry him because I wanted to, Clara went on. I was 17. My father owed him money, more than we could pay. Maddox said he'd forgive the debt if I became his wife. My father thought it was mercy. She gave a humorless laugh. It wasn't. She looked down at her hands, turning the tin cup slowly. He called me his property. He told everyone I belonged to him. And if I ever forgot it, he'd make sure I remembered. Eli felt his jaw tighten. How long? 6 years. 6 years of being told where to stand, who to speak to, when to smile. 6 years of... She stopped, her eyes flicking to the window as if the memories themselves might follow her inside. And now, he asked. Now I'm done. She met his eyes. I ran. He'll come for me, and he won't stop until he drags me back. That's what men like him do. He's not afraid of the law, because the law is afraid of him. Eli leaned back, his mind turning over the facts. Helping her meant crossing a man with power and men willing to kill for him. But sending her away meant delivering her right back into his hands. Before he could answer, the sound of hooves drifted in from the distance, closer now, more distinct. Clara's fingers tightened around the cup. Eli stood. Stay inside. Don't open the door unless it's me. She didn't argue. She just gave him one last look, something between gratitude and warning. As Eli stepped onto the porch, the fading light caught the dust rising higher on the horizon. The riders were almost here, and with them, trouble he could no longer ignore. Eli didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window, watching the moonlight paint silver lines across the dry earth. Somewhere out there, Royce Maddox's men were camping, waiting for dawn. For most of his life, Eli had avoided other people's wars. He'd told himself it wasn't his place, that a man could keep his soul clean if he kept his distance. But the truth was, distance had never cleaned a man's soul. It had only made it quiet. And now, with Clara in the other room, breathing steady in her sleep, the quiet felt like a coward's comfort. He thought about his wife, gone too soon. He thought about the day she'd been sick, how he'd sent for help, but it came too late. He'd told himself he'd done all he could, but deep down, he'd always known he could have ridden harder, shouted louder, risked more. He'd lived with that regret ever since. And now here was another moment, another chance. When the first light crept over the hills, Eli rose and began to prepare. He moved slow but deliberate, checking the rifle that leaned against the wall, making sure the chamber turned smooth. He counted the cartridges, then counted them again. Outside, he walked the fence line, looking for the best place to face what was coming. The barn door was latched tight. The horses were watered and calm, though they sensed the change in the air. He set a bucket of water on the porch, more out of habit than need, then stood for a long moment, hands on the railing. He wasn't a young man anymore, and he wasn't a fool. Maddox's men wouldn't come for talk. But Clara had given him the truth, and truth had a way of demanding a stand. When he finally went inside, she was already awake, sitting at the table. She didn't ask what he decided. She didn't need to. Whatever happens, Eli said, you don't go back. Not to him. Not to that life. She nodded once. No tears, no arguments. The decision had been made. And with it, the quiet life Eli Ward had known was gone for good. By mid-morning, the riders appeared. 4 of them, their shapes growing sharper with each step of their horses. The land was silent except for the creak of saddle leather and the slow clop of hooves on hard dirt. Eli stood in the yard, rifle resting easy in his hands. He didn't hide behind a barn or a fence. If they were coming for a fight, he wanted them to see him clear. The lead rider was a big man with a square jaw and eyes that didn't bother to blink much. His voice carried across the distance. We're looking for a woman. Came through here last night. Belongs to Royce Maddox. Eli didn't move. No one here belongs to Maddox. The man's mouth twisted. You hand her over. We'll be on our way. Refuse, and, well, you won't like what comes next. Eli's tone stayed level. What comes next is your choice, not mine. For a long moment, no one spoke. Dust swirled in the heat, hanging in the air like it was listening. Then the big man's hand twitched toward his gun. Eli moved first. One clean shot cracked the morning open. The lead rider dropped from his saddle before he could even clear leather. The other 3 hesitated, their eyes narrowing, weighing their odds. Maddox's name might have scared the law, but out here on this land, it meant nothing. From the porch, Clara stepped into view. She wasn't armed, but she stood straight, her chin high. Her presence seemed to light another fire in Eli. This wasn't just his fight anymore. The riders exchanged a glance, then turned their horses. They weren't ready to pay the cost today. As they disappeared over the ridge, Eli knew they'd be back. But today, the choice had been theirs, and they'd walked away. The land was quiet again, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, heavy but clean. The smell of gunpowder still lingered in the warm air, mixing with the dry scent of dust. Eli lowered his rifle and leaned it against the porch rail. Clara was still standing there, her eyes steady, no trace of the fear she'd carried when she first arrived. "They'll come back," she said. "I know," Eli replied. For a moment, they just looked at each other. There were no promises, no speeches, just an understanding. She wasn't alone anymore, and neither was he. As the sun climbed higher, they stepped inside together. The door shut behind them, and with it, the old life Eli had lived shut too. Her words from yesterday still rang in his mind. "I'm not your property." And he knew now, they'd make sure the world heard it again. If this story pulled you in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments what you think happened after the dust settled.